So today we will be taking up the interesting subject of God and justice. And this is a subject that has been coming up as a subject of interest to people. And so there's a diagram that I'm looking at that reads Dharamraj, the karma philosophy, guilt, revenge, detachment, justice. And outside that circle, it reads, God is outside the machinery of karma. Who is to blame? We say this is wrong, it should not be happening. God says it is happening. It is predestined. We say why it should not be happening. God says whatever is predestined is taking place. We say this is incomprehensible, therefore you are not God, or there is no God, or there is no justice. We say anything incomprehensible cannot be. Therefore, we are forced into denial. God says there are other options. There are other ways to interpret what you are perceiving and how you interpret your perceptions. You know that life is sacred, but you do not know what life is, and you do not know why it is sacred. You have heard that suicide is a sin, but you do not know why it is a sin in some cases, and why it is sacred in other cases. You know that taking revenge is wrong, but you seek justice by gaining retribution against those you consider to be wrongdoers. You speak of divine justice, but yet you see no justice in this world. And this makes you doubt the divine. You say, how did God allow this or that atrocity to happen? Or you say, where was God, such that this or that atrocity happened? You hold God accountable for the actions of humans. But you do not know who God is. Even in the house of God, you perceive individuals doing actions you consider to be wrong, and you see they are not being held accountable. This distresses you. When you see, hear, or come to know of anything that you consider wrong, you feel an inner urge to do something. What is the inner urge, and where does it come from? There is the phenomenon of conscience. What is conscience, and where did it come from? Does the inner urge to take revenge or get even arise from a stimulation from conscience, or the energy of karma, or something else? There is religious law and there is secular law. Secular law arises out of religious law. Where does religious law come from? The founders of religions speak about the law, but none of them invented the law. Where does law come from? Religions say that the originator of all things is God. They also say that God gave the law. But when, to whom, and under what circumstances? This they do not say. The biblical 10 commandments are rules, but offer no explanation of the law. Why does the patriarchal law, which is the same as religious law, consider women and children responsible for actions done against them by men who are in a position of power over these women and children? Who gave them that right? The only scripture in which it is clearly stated that God speaks is the Bhagavad-Gita. This is the only document in existence where God explains in detail the law of karma or karma philosophy. The explanation is subtle and intricate. It is provided to a king or ruler or person with social, political, and economic power. It is given in the circumstances of ethical dilemma. It is heard by a third party who recounts what is being heard to others at the time when God is speaking. It is said that this was given 5,000 years ago and at the time of the great and final World War. It stands to reason that the answer to the above questions is more likely to be found in the Gita than from any other source. It also suggests that there is a very important link between God and justice. God explains the law of karma. This law is a spiritual law, like the laws of physics. No one decided what these laws are. They are to be discerned. The laws of physics govern matter, and the laws of karma govern the interaction between and among human beings, between human beings and matter, and between human beings and the divine. It is not possible to infer the laws of the universe by looking at one small piece. God is the only being who is outside the machinery of the universe and its laws, both physical and spiritual. God is the only one who can describe these laws and their workings. Therefore, gaining access to the mind of God is the most useful pursuit. Once everything is clear, then you can see clearly and your questions fall away. The problem is religions have provided insufficient and misleading information, leading to faulty logic. Human conscience is a good guide, but was polluted and deactivated through the interference of conventional morality, trauma, spiritual weakness, and an array of vices. The solution seems to be to put all that religious and secular information on one side and study what God has to say and see if you can work with that. However, it takes a strong, clean, and independent individual to do this. Are you such? I want to welcome all of you to today's talk entitled God and Justice. I am Magla Pillay and I'm currently in South Africa, and Sister Denise, who is currently in San Francisco, will be addressing us on this topic. So I invite you all to sit back and enjoy the next hour or so with us. And if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat group. And after Sister Denise has shared with us, we will then be taking up questions and comments that you have on the subject. Thank you, Sister Denise. Over to you.
Thank you, Magla. Well, it is said that truth is simple, but it's really very intricate and complex. And this is why I think it's difficult for people to grasp what is really happening. And what we've been learning in the study of Raj Yoga given by Incorporeal God through the medium of Prajapita Brahma is that there are several completely different but mutually not mutually dependent, but working together, these energies. So one of them is, there is the power of God, most definitely. That is a big energy. And another one is the law of karma. And that is a very big energy. We saw in the graphic that was at the beginning of this program, the symbol of justice. And the symbol is of a woman. And usually women are used as symbols for something that people can't quite figure out. And then she's blindfolded because they say justice is blind. And then it's the scales. And so the law of karma is an energy that seeks to bring everything into equilibrium. And it doesn't consider any kind of pleas or any efforts to adjust it one way or the other in favor of someone and not of someone else. So you cannot interfere with the laws of karma. They are an energy by themselves, and they operate whether you like it or not. And generally speaking, people don't like the laws of karma because there is this feeling in people concerning forgiveness that, well, you know, I made a mistake and God will forgive me because of this and that. But you can't really do that with the laws of karma. Whatever is done, positive or negative, there is an equal and opposite reaction or result. And so this is a force that you cannot tamper with. In terms of the system of justice that we have in the human world with courts and everything, it is possible to corrupt the judges, to bend the system, to make certain information hidden so that the course of justice is made to go in a different way from what it would go if all the information were known. But you can't do that with the laws of karma. It just goes how it goes, and that's that. And there is nothing you can do. So one is actually powerless in the face of the law of karma. And so the more you understand and know the law of karma, the more you can act in accordance with the laws so that you do not get any unexpected surprises. So knowing the laws of karma is really important for a human being to be able to operate in the social context, because the laws of karma govern the interaction between people and each other. It governs the interaction between people and nature. It governs the interaction between people and God. And so it's a very big force. But another force, which is very difficult for people to deal with and understand and come to terms with, and that is the force of predestination. And this is very difficult for people to come to terms with because you do not know the future. You know the past as far as there is recorded history, but then history is written by people who will write it according to such a way that makes the writers of history look like the good guys, and then there are other people who are the bad guys. And this is why even the historical record gets questioned by people who have been described in a certain way. And particularly in the United States at this time, it is the Thanksgiving holidays. And there's a story about Thanksgiving, which is known to all the dominant community in North America. And it describes the relationship between the colonialists and settlers and the native peoples. But nowadays, the native peoples are saying, well, this story is nothing to do with what really happened, and we need to set the record straight. So what we have in our hands called history may or may not be correct. And what we are seeing is very often it's not correct, it's biased, it's incomplete. And so we're having to face these realities. And what we're looking at in this study and practice of Raj Yoga and the series called Explorations of Gyan and Yoga is what is really going on. And under the subject of God and justice, it's really, in many ways, a response to a complaint by people who think of themselves as good people. They are law-abiding people. They have a very active conscience, and they are troubled by what they see as injustice in the world. And this is a very big issue for many, many people. And this is because of the way the cultures and religions have described God and justice. And so today I'm looking at describing God and justice and this question of predestination, which is another element that plays a very, very important part in all of this. And it's completely different from the narrative that we get from any of the religions in the world, at least the dominant religions. Some of those religions that are called primitive religions actually are much more accurate than the dominant religions, but they are not given any credibility. And so most people don't even know what they say. But God is not responsible for giving the reward and punishment for people's actions. And the religions always say that this is in the hands of God. And God will say, well, actually, it's an automatic machinery of the law of karma. Whatever you do, you will get the reward for it, whether it is positive or negative. And this period of time that we're in at the moment is called the time of reckoning, the time of settlement. And so what we're seeing at the moment is that all of the accumulated negative karma is up for payment. And so this is why there are a lot of things going on that are making people really afraid, and people are suffering a great deal. And what is perceived in the minds of those who are observing all of this is that it is unfair, it is unjust, and they're looking to God and saying, what are you doing? And God is giving a reply in the teachings that he gives, which is called Raj Yoga, and which is also called the knowledge of the Gita. And the Gita that we have these days has been altered a great deal over the centuries. And so we have heard in our teachings that God says, I have come once again to give you the knowledge of the Gita, because the Gita has been falsified by different interpretations that have been inserted into that written scripture. And so this is of great interest, because it is the only way that we can really find out what is going on and what this thing called divine justice is. So when people use the word divine justice, they're assuming that God is sitting there in judgment over everything and everyone and giving the judgments and sentences. And they are saying, well, from our angle of view, it's not being done correctly. And so there's a lot of complaints against God. So God gives his reply, in which he says, you need to bear in mind that there are energies that control what's happening, that people really don't understand, or that they have heard of, but they understand them incorrectly. So one of them is the energy of predestination. And it is very clearly stated in the Gita that whatever is predestined is what's happening. And so if we take the angle of predestination and apply that angle of vision to the world that's going on here, we will see that it is predestined that there will be climate change, that there will be the COVID pandemic, that there will be refugees, there will be exploitation, all these things. If you look at it through the angle of the laws of karma and the settlement of karma, you can see that over a period of many thousands of years, many people, countries, civilizations have risen and fallen. And in the process, people have done actions which have put them into debt. And the debt can be deferred, repayment of the debt can be deferred. But when you reach to this period of time, all debts must be settled. And so this is a time when everything is getting settled. And because you're looking at it just in terms of what you can see at the present time, and you look at it through the historical record, and you say, this is not right. And the reason you say it's not right is because you do not know the details of reincarnation. And what happens, for example, if you take the example of war, and you have one set of people in military conflict against another set of people. It could be between nations, or it could be between communities within a nation, a civil war. And it could be between different communities that coexist in one nation. It could be even in families. But all of these conflicts go back a long way. And the protagonists, when somebody kills somebody else, they reincarnate on the other side. Or they can reincarnate if it's if it's a war between races, and we do have a lot of racial conflict at this time. Someone kills someone, and maybe they'd also die, and both of them will reincarnate and switch sides. But you can't see that. And so you see only what's in front of your eyes. And when you evaluate on the basis of what's in front of your eyes and the available historical record, because whatever is not recorded, you don't know. And so your evaluation of what's happening is very limited by lack of information. And so God is the one who knows all the details, who knows the stories of each individual, and who also says everyone is an actor. And there is a drama going on here, a three-dimensional film, and all the souls are actors in it. And so they play roles, and every single person's role is half happiness and half sorrow, half positive and half negative. So the whole process is balanced day and night, positive, negative. Every single individual has their bright side and their dark side. And all of this plays out in this enormous film called The Story of Humanity, with up to 8 billion actors. And there are every home is a stage in the big theater. There is the theater of war. There is the theater of the cultures and the history and the stories. And it's a very vast and very complex. And much of it is unknown, because the first half of the drama, according to the information that he's given us, the entire historical record of the Golden Age and Silver Age is obliterated in the small destruction. And what we have is a mythology and stories and images and symbols, which people interpret however they want. And some people get it more or less right, but a lot of people get it totally wrong. And yet there are things that persist. And one thing we know about truth is that it has this characteristic of persisting. So there will be signs of truth. And so if you are a kind of forensic expert on truth, you will look for all the various different signs. And there are so many people who are trying to find out what's really going on. And they generally find that the narrative that they come up with is quite different from the narrative that most people believe. And so what we are having to deal with in this EGY, this session of exploration of Gyan and yoga, is this big issue between what people assume to be the right way of looking at things, and then the angle of vision that we are being given by incorporeal God Shiv Baba, who says, you're not taking into consideration that everything is predestined, as well as the laws of karma are playing out, as well as I, God, know who is who and what's happening, as well as this is the last moments of the cycle when all of the accounts are up for settlement and the whole play is about to finish and a new one is getting established, which will rise like a phoenix out of the ashes of the destruction of the old one, and the game will start again. every single being is eternal and immortal, and every single being has their own story which they play out. And the drama is like a huge wheel which turns in a particular way, and it can only turn in that way. And that is called, sometimes we have the expression, the destiny of the drama. But predestination is something that people have a hard time dealing with, because they want to know, okay, if it's predestined, then we want to know everything from the beginning through the middle to the end. And so God says, okay, well, I can tell you that. And he does describe the knowledge of the drama. And he says that this is it. But it is very, very hard for a human being to endure that information, very hard to deal with. And this is why it can only be given at the end of the drama, when you have already passed through the world of heaven and the world of hell, and now the world of hell, the world of settlement of karma, the world of the dark night of the soul is just about to be finished. And the most important thing that we need to know is that each and every one of us is immortal, and no one can get lost. No soul can be destroyed. Physical things come and go. They get destroyed, they get created. And as Einstein had said, matter cannot be created or destroyed, it just gets changed. And in the same way, the soul cannot be created or destroyed, but its integrity also cannot be created or destroyed. Matter keeps switching around, and one object becomes another object, or becomes dust, or from dust you make something else. So you don't really track particular pieces of matter, but souls are integral and they have their own role. And so then there comes this question, who am I? And the thing that is really difficult is to come to terms with who am I and what do I do in this drama? Because there are paradoxes that are very, very difficult to manage. And in a couple of Murlis fairly recently, Baba was saying very clearly, look, the sins that you commit are also predestined. And the suffering you must bear as a consequence of having performed negative action must be borne. So you don't have any choice, and you have to pay. And people say, that is an unbearable piece of information. We cannot bear it. And so he says, well, at the time when everything is finishing, that's the time when it becomes bearable, because you already passed through and you're still here. And all of this is an identically repeating performance. It's a film. And everybody loves to watch movies, and the movie industry is doing really well. Nowadays, people make their own movies. It's so simple, so easy. And there is such a technology that you can change everything and make it whatever you want it to be. And that's just the nature of the technology that we have today. But it's very helpful for an individual to be able to understand the reality of this drama, that we are all spectators, we are all actors, and everything that we perceive going on in the material world, the location of our perceptions is in our mind. And so there is another energy that we have to deal with, and that is the energy of illusion. And so these are difficult energies to deal with individually, but then you have to put them all together. And so he says that all of these things that you are perceiving, they're actually going on in your mind. And the way that you can deal with this is to know that it's a performance, it's a real performance. You feel everything that is there, you see everything that is there, but it's possible for you to adopt a position of detachment in the face of it. And this detachment allows you to let go and to move on, and to not actually be so traumatized by the traumatic nature of the events that are going on. Now, this is all quite difficult for people to manage, but we have a choice here. And I think it's important to look at this choice. On one side, you perceive the world as we know it through the angle of your material vision, and you see that it doesn't make any sense and that it's unbearable because you don't see any justice and you hate that. But on the other side, you have another choice, which is to learn to see the energies of the laws of karma, the energy of predestination, the energy of the immortality and eternity of the soul, who is an actor who plays a role, but who can never be destroyed, but who is impacted by all of these things, but who ultimately gets restored to full power through contact with God. And so the role of God in all of this is to enable us to get through this, what's going on, and to come back into our original condition, fully empowered, fully virtuous, fully free. And this process of reacquiring our energy, our spiritual wisdom, our beauty, and all the extreme human suffering and the turbulence in nature vanishes, and even vanishes from memory. So it is a really extraordinary composition, you can say. And it can be understood by those who sit with it, study it. And it is also said those who have passed through the whole thing also are those who can understand it. And so we have been called by God to study this. And he says fairly clearly that you study this because you're able to understand it, and you're able to understand it because you have been through the whole cycle. You are those souls who were there at the beginning, you've been there through the middle, you're here at the end. The entire knowledge is in your memory, but it is hidden because you cannot handle the totality of it until you reach the end, whereas God can handle the totality of it from the beginning through the middle to the end, and is also outside the machinery of it, and is also the one who explains it and who brings everything back to its original state. Now, this is quite complex, but when you look at it from the angle that God is explaining it to us, then you see that, yeah, there is divine justice. It is exactly as it should be. But you cannot see it unless you look at it with the third eye. You cannot see it unless you have access to all the information. And it is coming, and this is a wonder. So I will stop there, and let's go back to Magla and your questions. And Magla, I'm sure that you will have a lot of things to say about this. Magla works as a magistrate, a judge in the court system. And so from that angle of experience with law, you're very aware about justice as it is, as it happens in what we call the real world.
Yes, Sister Denise, that is my daily reality. But what I like about what you said is that your take on it is refreshingly different in that your perspective is spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And it has obviously, law of karma affects every one of us. And unfortunately, most people are ignorant as to how it plays out. And Sister Denise, one of the questions I get asked most often from the victims of crime or domestic violence, or even parents of a child I met recently who has leukemia, 4-year-old, is a question that gets asked often is, why do bad things happen to good people?
Well,
There's
yes.
so much pain in that question.
That is the big question. Why do bad things happen to good people? What God tells us is every single one of you is a good person. Every single one. Every soul is essentially pure, peaceful, powerful, loving, blissful. And you go through this cycle. You play many roles. And there are some bad things that happen to good people for the purpose of making them strong and experienced. So that is a very important reason. And some things happen to good people, some bad things happen to good people because it is a settlement of karma from another time which you don't know anything about, because all you know about yourself is from your birth of this body until the present moment. And everyone does a lot of good karma and also negative karma. And the good karma is rewarded by good circumstances and situations, and then the bad karma comes up for payment every so often. And because we do not remember what roles we have played in other times and what has been our interaction with people in other times, and so when something really bad happens to someone who considers themselves and other people consider them as good people, then you have no explanation because you do not have access to the things of other lifetimes. And it's like a safety mechanism, because if you would know who you have been in all of the lives that you have had, you would have a lot of difficulty trying to figure out what your identity is. Because you would have been male sometimes, female sometimes, you would have lived in different races, you would have passed through wars and conflicts, you would have been caught in situations that are out of your control, but yet which in which you perform negative action that you wouldn't have performed if you were in control. And it's very, very complicated, enough to make a person crazy. And so the safety mechanism of forgetting whatever you have done in previous births is there. But what you do have is something called sanskaras. And the sanskaras are indicators of tendencies. And so if you look at yourself really, really deeply, you can understand that you have a lot of good characteristics, and you also have weaknesses, character defects. And one of the things that impacts a person very, very much, which the religions and the world, the social sociologists and psychologists don't really see clearly, is how much a person is corrupted when bad things happen to them, especially as children, and then that can cause a person to perform bad actions in later life. And so the law of karma and drama, and it's very complicated, and they all are working together. So we have to separate them to look at how these laws are, but they do not operate in isolation. They operate all together all the time. And therefore, we can understand that bad things happen to everybody, and that you can't really categorize people as good people and bad people, but you can say that good people do bad things, and that there are people who are in bad situations, which is connected with their role and with their karma. But we are really not in a position to divide people up into good people and bad people, because it's really not that simple. It's quite complex.
Thank you for that. I'd now like to go through the questions that are on the chat group. Baba says, if you make a mistake and tell him half the debt will be paid off, what relationships is there between Baba and karma in that sense? Are visions, spiritual experiences given by Baba, or is it the law of karma?
Well, this is my point exactly. You cannot look at one part of the knowledge and discount the other part and say it's either or. And this is what people normally do. Either it's the law of karma or it's destiny. No, it is destiny, and it's the law of karma, and you have free will, and it's in your role, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you will be held accountable. Very difficult conundrum.
Yeah, difficult indeed.
We have to come to terms with it. I think that is a good thing, coming to terms with all of these things and being okay with it. And that cannot happen easily. You have to really sit with it, meditate on it, study it. And it takes years to come to terms with these things.
The next question is, could predestination be related to simultaneous time, where it is said that what you decide in your present not only determines the future, but can also influence your past, because they are simultaneous timelines? Wouldn't this have something to do with what Baba says, that he is already predestined, but at the same time you decide?
Well, this idea of simultaneous timelines, I don't know whether that's anything to do with Gyan, although there are a lot of people who talk about it. But if you look at the knowledge as he gives it, you will see that the future exists already and the past exists already, and you are in the present, and you do not know the future, and you know only some of the past. And what you do is going to be your response to whatever is going on around you. And you will do what you do because of who you are, much more than because of what's going on. And it doesn't mean that the past and the future and the present are simultaneous timelines. No, that is not what's going on, but that they exist. The future exists, and it is whatever it is. You cannot change it because everything that's happening is predestined. But that does not imply simultaneous timelines, although a lot of people have come up with that idea. But it's because they do understand that the past, the present, and the future are all existing, but time itself is a line that you are riding on, moving from the past through the present towards the future. And every time you do something, you are free to do it, but you're not as free as you think, because you have a role that is fixed that you play. And when you are soul conscious and in your power, it is possible for you to activate your purest sanskaras. But when you are not in your power and you're not in your, what he calls your self-honor, then you are completely under the influence of the current time that you're passing through and the energies of that time. So the importance of the practice of Raj Yoga is that you're able to make choices that are not the same as your current condition in the current time, because you have access to aspects of yourself from another time. But that does not imply simultaneous timelines, something different. Does that make sense to you? It's quite complicated.
Yes, clearly so. The question is, the knowledge of drama refers to many paradoxes, such as predestination. Can you explain what is the difference of applying it as a fact or an instrument?
Okay. BKs learn the knowledge of the drama, in which it is said it's a 5,000-year cycle and everything is there. And so they are looking at it as a fact, and it is a fact, but you don't use the drama as facts very effectively. It is very important to know that it is an instrument. The knowledge of the drama is an instrument. The drama itself is not an instrument. The knowledge of the drama is an instrument, and you need to know how to use the knowledge of the drama. And one thing that you have to do with the knowledge of the drama is to spin it or to rotate it. And when you do that, it means that you're able to take into consideration the element of predestination. So that is an energy that you have with you as you use this instrument. Then you look at an actual event that is going on in front of you, which requires you to act. And you have to consult your conscience and have a look at this, what is called the past, present, and future. And then you have to decide what is the best action to perform in the context of the wider view of the knowledge of the drama. Because you understand that whatever you do, you can predict what the consequences will be for you and for others. And so you can make a free choice as long as you are independent of the energies of that scene that are affecting you emotionally. And what Baba calls ego is it's a kind of weakness that causes you to be motivated by your emotions instead of motivated by the clarity of seeing the past, present, and future and deciding what would be the best action to perform independently of your feelings. And there's very few people who are free enough to be able to do that. But this is what the instrument of the drama is for, so that you can perform pure karma in spite of all of the forces which want you to continue to perform negative karma and get yourself further caught up in the bondages of karma. And so the knowledge of the drama is an instrument to free yourself from those energies.
Is it possible from Raja Yoga to find the answer to why did Baba choose me to live this life?
Ah, what an amazing question. He chooses you because of who you are. He chooses those who have passed through the whole cycle. Because if you've passed through the whole cycle, then what he's talking about is also in you, because your cycle of lives corresponds to the cycle of the world. And so when he talks to you about the cycle of the world, you can relate to it because it's the same inside your own soul. A person who hasn't passed through the whole cycle doesn't have that as part of their experience, as part of their role, and so they can't really relate to it. So this is why you're chosen. And it's not really about whether you're a good person or a bad person or something like that. Anyway, you're a good person, and bad things have happened to you, no doubt, but that's par for the course. The key element is you're chosen because you were there at the beginning. And then you have to come to terms with that, oh my God, I was there. And I passed through everything that he's talking about. And also, it means that you have a role to play in this period, which we call the period of establishment, that you are called by God to come to terms with this knowledge. And you can come to terms with it if it's all in you, you know, and then to bring yourself to a state of being where you have that clarity, you've come to terms with everything, and you have been able to pull into yourself full power from God. And then you become an instrument yourself to give that power to the people of the world who maybe can't get it for themselves. So you have a duty, you have a responsibility. And so then it becomes important to study this and to acquire the strength to be able to fulfill the duty that comes with having the knowledge, because knowing these things means you have a responsibility, and he gives you the power to carry out that responsibility. And it'll be a big surprise to you because you think, oh, I'm just a nobody in particular, which everyone is by the time you get to the last birth, but you don't know who you were. And it's something that is written in the Gita. You don't know your births, he says. You don't know your births. I know your births. So I'm calling you because I know who you are. And I will tell you who you are, and you will gradually come to terms with that too. So it's amazing.
Yeah, that is quite Beautiful.
Mm.
Sister Denise, next question. You say that the Gita has been altered and God says he has come once again to clarify it as the Gita has been manipulated. Do this repeats in every cycle, every 5,000 years?
Well, yes, everything repeats, so that also has to repeat. And it's an amazing dance, really, if you think about it. And this is why he calls it a drama. And so he speaks, and he speaks truth, and the truth creates the true world. And then the world goes through the spring, summer, autumn, winter. It goes through the day and the night. And the only way that the night can happen is for the Gita to be falsified. And the only way that God can be, that God can reappear in the human world is for there to be massive suffering, because nobody remembers God unless they are suffering. And so God never goes to heaven because nobody's suffering there. But he does create heaven, definitely, at the time of the Great World War, which is mentioned in the Gita, and at the time when everyone is suffering. The last resort is always to turn to God. So people are getting to that point where it's a last resort is happening a lot, and people are really turning to God, and God is fully responsive to the call of the people. But then he also says, I cannot come before my time. And I also have a fixed role in the drama, and I can only come when things are really bad. And when people of religion are having beliefs which turn them against God. And so all of this is in the script. And to get this perspective on the whole script, where you see the whole thing and you see your part within it, your part with God, it is mind-blowing and fascinating and complex. And so this is our study. And here we are in it, but we're also able to take a step back and look at it, because God teaches us how to look at it from his perspective. And here we are. This is the most extraordinary gift, which he also calls, this is my inheritance for you. I give you the knowledge. You can understand everything about the creator and the creation. And now use this knowledge and take care of the world. Yet it will grow old and deteriorate. And it takes 5,000 years to do that. So this is the time when one film is finishing and the repeat performance is starting. So enjoy the great theater of the story of humanity. It's really special.
Okay, next question. How to respond in a pedagogical way, law of karma in brackets, to the question of non-Brahmins when they see all the catastrophes that are happening around them and in the world at the moment?
Well, this is why we're learning these things, and we have to learn it deeply. It takes time for us to really be able to give satisfactory answers to these questions, because people look at it from, the angle of sense perception. You see what's going on, you see it's really bad, and you say it should not be like this. And you say that because of the ideas that are there in the cultures, in the religions, in science. All of it says there is progress. All of it says everything makes sense. And when you look at it, you say, it doesn't look like progress and nothing looks like it makes any sense. What's going on? And when you tell somebody what's going on, they can't process it, they can't get it. And so therefore, the way that Shiv Baba teaches us is to anchor you to certain things that you do accept. And he is talking mostly to Hindus whose religion is based on all sorts of mythology and stories and symbols and so on. And people accept a lot of ideas which are incompatible with each other, and then they mix those ancient ideas with modern ideas, and it gets to be very mixed up. And so he will take something that somebody accepts, and then he will show them how their thinking is incoherent and illogical to arrive at the conclusions that they arrived at. And so he really teaches us an incredible, clear logic. And he does that by giving additional missing information to the correct information that we already have. And then he also points out how information that we have accepted as truth is inconsistent, incoherent, and actually not true. So he gives us what he calls a divine intellect. And this is a very gradual process. And the first thing he says is, look, there's no such thing as death. There's death of the body, no doubt, but there's not death of you. And people are very afraid of death. And they're very upset when somebody else dies, you see, because they think they've lost someone. And you say, nobody can get lost. Nobody can disappear. You're there forever. And this is another very good reason why it makes a difference what you do, because you cannot get away with anything. And so he gives us a way to function where we are very focused on performing pure karma, because you got to live with yourself forever and there's no escape. But how you explain that to people, you know, you have to study this, sit there, practice. Lots of people will come along and they will let you know that you haven't explained it very well, and they will not be happy. And so you go back to your drawing board and get your explanation such that it gets better and better and better, because by explaining to people, you also come to understand it better, because they will give you a hard time and make you get it right before they'll accept anything.
Next question, does God intervene drama in any way? And if yes, how?
Well, sometimes he says he doesn't, but we can see that he does. And how does he do it? It's very interesting. One thing he says is he will not go against the laws of nature. So he won't do miracles, like he won't like make dead people come alive and things like that. But he does. You can experience this when you come to God and you develop a relationship with God and you study his material and you follow what he's telling, you come into karmic account with God. And then your motivation that what you do is in order to reveal God, in order to make God clear, in order to make God's knowledge clear, and in order to enable people to appreciate God, respect God, love God, and recognize God. And so he will take care of you. And there are just many, many people, they may be in Gyan or they may not be in Gyan, but they have love for God. And when you have love for God, it sets up a resonance where even in a situation where things could go wrong, they don't, they go right. And it's a kind of the opposite of what they call Murphy's Law, which is anything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong. But why would it go wrong? Is because you're in a dissonant type of resonance with the world, with reality, and that you're motivated by negativity, and that causes things to go wrong. And so he will intervene by getting you to be in resonance with him, which brings everything into balance, because he's a force that causes everything to become pure and perfect and in balance and good, you can say. And so then you experience many things where like you get yourself into trouble, no doubt, but out of that you get a lot of lessons. And but you also feel this protection. You feel because you are connected with God, it sets up this energy field where something that could go wrong if you were not in that energy field won't happen. And you get many stories like this, sort of anecdotal stories. And so his intervention in the drama is very discreet. And I think it's also very much dependent on your yoga. So the whole matter of yoga becomes very important. When you're in yoga with God, it just causes things to go well. And when you're motivated by ego, he calls it often ego, which is like dark forces, then things will go wrong. So there are these two forces, the force of God and the force of darkness, and it's up to you which one you're in resonance with. If you're in resonance with the force of darkness, things will go wrong. And you're in the circumstances of darkness, but in resonance with God, you'll get through it quite well.
Sorry, Denise. All is predestined. Is freedom not about to have choices?
Well, I mentioned it a little bit earlier also. Yes, you are free, but you are not free as long as you are under the influence of your negative karma, as long as you're under the influence of materialism, as long as you're under the influence of your emotions. You're not free. You're totally under those influences. And in order to be free, you have to be really free yourself from your karmic accounts and from the influences of other people. And then you can use your freedom. But there are very few people who value freedom to the extent to be able to be free from their desires and the impact of their past negative karma, to be able to be as free as God, who is clearly in the context of a predestined drama. But there are moments in the drama. It's a very interesting phenomenon. There are moments where you have options. You could do this or you could do that. It's open. and it's open for a second or two, and you can decide, but you have to be free internally to make a really free choice. And then there are other things where you just you're not free. The force of predestination is totally pressing down on you. And this is something that is mentioned by the Serenity Prayer of Alcoholics Anonymous, where the supplicant is asking God to have the power to do what they need to do at the time when they can, and to accept the things that they can't control, and the wisdom to know the difference. And if you can get that right, you're really ahead.
Next question. Are tests to make us stronger also part of the law of karma, albeit not one with the energy of settlement, but the energy of pure upliftment, in brackets, without settlement?
Something that happens to you, you have to interpret it. Is this happening because it's settlement of karma and I have to take the punishment? Or is this happening because it's a test which is there to make me stronger? And it's up to you how you interpret it. And so my personal choice is to say, okay, whatever it is, whether it's a test or whether it's a settlement of karma, but I'm going to consider it to be a test, even if I know very well it's a settlement of karma, because when it's a settlement of karma and you think you're paying, you're getting punished, etc., it's, to me, it's less personally empowered than if you think it's a test. Because if you think it's a test, then you're looking for what's going to be the lesson for you, what's going to empower you, what's going to make you experienced. And then you're looking at it from an angle that brings you more and more into your power. So I prefer to do that. But it's up to every individual how you interpret what's going on.
A soul wants to know if everything is predestined and forces like karma has nothing to do with God, what exactly is the role of God for half a cycle?
Well, which half of the cycle are you talking about? The second half?
It doesn't state, but my thought was, if the soul is referring to the first half of the cycle, I thought he was having a rest because he's tired after Sangam Yuga.
Exactly. Yeah. He says, the first half of the cycle, you don't need me. So I'm watching the world of heaven from my angle, but I don't participate because he is a reciprocal type of being, and he will respond when you reach out to him. And that doesn't happen until the second half of the cycle. And so he is interacting with people for the whole second half of the cycle and responding to the genuine love and belief. So even if somebody's belief is not quite right, but it's genuine, they really feel that and mean that, he will respond in kind. And then in the confluence age, he becomes the father, the teacher, and the Satguru, and really gives us the knowledge and interacts with us full on every day for many, many years during our last life. And he makes us into Brahmins and prepares us for the next cycle. So that's a very, very busy time for him. And he also is doing a lot of other things besides looking after us. He's doing things with the scientific community, with the religious leaders, so many activities he's doing that he doesn't tell us about, or he gives an indication only. But he's very busy for the whole second half of the cycle, responding to the different devotees in different religions and giving response, giving energy, giving the feeling of his presence to those who love him.
Okay. Next question. Is it that the end of time being fixed, the time to settle our karmic accounts reducing, the accounts are compressed and becoming denser and denser, and in brackets up to explode? Sister Denise, I see it's 1626. So I think this is our last question.
Okay, yeah. Well, I would say everything is getting more and more intense. And as far as possible, we are settling our accounts, we are reducing them as much as we possibly can, but they're also getting more intense. And for the world, it's getting very intense. And ultimately it is going to explode, but I think things have to get a lot more difficult. But what I'm seeing is they're really, really rapidly intensifying, and it's piling up and getting very, very difficult because you're getting financial problems and the climate change problems, the food shortages, the diseases, the wars, the civil disturbance, the stress, the violence within families, within communities. It's getting very, very difficult for people to bear. And I think people will be calling out to God to give them strength. And this is what he wants to use us for. He says you have to be conduits so that people can actually feel my strength and my peace. And you have to have very, very powerful yoga so that you can put this out so that people can feel the resonance and the vibration that while they're passing through this, there is someone helping them. This is our responsibility. So we have to handle our accounts because you can't be doing that work and handling your accounts. It's too much. But still you have to. Okay.
Okay, Sister Denise, I think we're almost at the end of today's lesson. It's my time, 2 minutes to go. Mm-hmm. So we'll end up with a moment of silence. And we'll perhaps reconsider doing another session because there's literally 13 messages left on the chat site and people have very real questions and concerns.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all very much for being with us today. Let us close with a moment of remembrance and silence, and see you all again very, very soon. Om Shanti.